Welcome into another edition of the All Things Bama podcast powered by BamaCentral.com, your Sports Illustrated and Fan Nation home for Alabama Crimson Tide news. I'm your host, Tyler Martin. I'm joined for a special edition of the show to preview the 2022 SEC Men's Basketball Tournament with Katie Windham, Tony Tsoukalas. This one will be strictly basketball. Alabama gets going underway Thursday night. They'll play the winner of Vanderbilt and Georgia. Guys, real quick, I don't really see a way Georgia wins that game at all. You know, it was announced, Tom Crean and UGA, they're going to split ways after the season. So pretty much head coachless at this point. I see Alabama playing a rematch with Scottie Pippen Jr. and the Commodores.
Go ahead, Katie.
I'm sure Alabama would love to avenge that loss to Georgia, the one team that Georgia was able to beat in the conference. I don't see any way that happens. I'm sure Georgia's just hoping to get out of this season as soon as possible at this point. But it is March, so never say never.
I think it's probably better for Alabama that they play Vanderbilt because I think they need at least some semblance of a quality win to kind of get them back on track. What I guess is beating Georgia proof for Alabama, setting them up. I think, beating Vanderbilt might be more of a statement, might be more of a, they say they want to catch, lightning in a bottle, or kind of like, I don't even know if that's the right term, but just kind of like get more in a groove, kind of maybe capture that, Auburn energy from a few years ago. I think if they're going to do that, they're going to have to beat some good teams. So I feel like it's almost better if they play better competition, because maybe it'll amp them up to play a little bit better. This is an Alabama team that can beat, anybody on the court. It's a matter of how it plays itself. So I think it'll be better to have to play Vanderbilt.
And Katie, we talked about this before. We love the scenery right there in the car. It's a great background for this episode for sure.
Yeah, really fitting as, we're getting ready to head on down to Tampa. Got to pull out the summer clothes for Florida weather, even though I looked and it's obviously going to be warmer there than it is here. But I think it is supposed to be a little overcast, which is sad. But, also don't know how much to pack, because you never know with this Alabama team how long we'll be down there.
Yeah, Tyler's the one to talk about this pink shirt. He's got the Southern Florida weather shirt on as well.
We're recording this on International Women's Day, so I'm supporting the women in my life. But anyway, we're going to have you down there, Katie. Joey Black will be down there as well. And I think Blake Byler will be down there too, one of our interns.
Right.
You guys will be definitely, covering whatever long this run is. And, just kind of thinking of this team, right? Had they beat LSU last Saturday, and I know it was just really for seeding, but it almost feels better if they just would have won that. They would be in that top half rather than the bottom half of the bracket, because now you've got to go through Kentucky, and then you've got to go through Arkansas, right? Arkansas has won 15 of their last 17 games, some absurd number like that. So Alabama's got a way tough. It might not be, these other teams, the 3 and 4 seed, by their name. But the reality is that it's a tougher path to the title game rather than going through a Tennessee who got number 2, right? Who Alabama could have ended up playing.
Tennessee is on Alabama's side of the bracket. It'd be Tennessee and Kentucky.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking 3 and 4 on the same side. Okay, that's right. So, but still, though, to me, that it's still a much harder first game, definitely with Vanderbilt, because of the definitely Scottie Pippen Jr., one guy who can kind of take over. And we saw that in that game where he shot 18 free throws, 13 over the final 3 minutes, just absurd like that. But we'll see what this Alabama team's got to score. It never fails. Alabama's always on the side with Kentucky, and I know that's annoying for a lot of fans. But this year, I don't really see any in this setting, what we're about to see in Tampa. I don't see really any team getting past the Wildcats right now.
Yeah, it was always inevitably going to be Kentucky, right? That's just like Alabama basketball in the SEC tournament has to be Kentucky, and I think they'll probably end up playing the Wildcats this year as well. But then again, I don't think Kentucky wants to play Alabama. If you're Kentucky, right? Do you want to I know some of these bigger teams, do you want to play Alabama? I think, when you're looking at the vantage points of some of these other bigger teams, they're kind of probably hoping Alabama gets bounced early, because their ranking doesn't necessarily match. I think some of these bigger teams, I guess, are kind of maybe upset that Alabama got put in their, side of the bracket.
Yeah, I do think that the Kentucky Alabama doesn't match up with them well. And even, we saw the last matchup, they were without Sphere Wheeler and Ty Washington, and they still scored 90 points. So, which, obviously the Alabama defense didn't necessarily show up that day. But I mean, obviously Alabama didn't finish the season the way they wanted to. Would have rather probably had that 5 seed with the win over LSU, or, even beating A&M at home. But I really don't. I mean, I feel like all 4 of these top seeds in the SEC this year, with Auburn, Arkansas, Kentucky, and Tennessee, are all playing pretty good basketball right now. And there's no easy path to, the championship game this year. They're going to have to beat good teams, which, like we've talked about, a lot of the things we talk about with this basketball team, it kind of feels like monotonous, like we're saying the same things over and over again, because like we are. Nate Oates is saying the same things over and over again. They practice well. He wants to see consistent effort. They had a great week of practice, but then they don't play well in the game. They can beat anyone in the country. They can lose anyone in the country. Like, I feel like that's what we're saying. They can beat anyone. So do they have the capability to win the whole thing? Yeah, but it all depends on which team's going to show up.
Yeah, and if they do, I mean, it's going to be a remarkable coaching effort from Coach Oates. I mean, and it'd be one of his best of his young career, no doubt about that. And I don't know if you guys saw it, but the SEC Network had a kind of inside Alabama basketball type deal, like documentary style, into the program. And you can kind of sense some frustration with him this year. And I know Jason Holt didn't travel to Baton Rouge. He's making TikToks during games. There's kind of some internal issues there as well, but you could just sense the frustration. And I'm curious to know that, okay, out of all the things this season that would have woken up this Alabama basketball team, right, losing to Missouri, losing to Georgia, and you would think, okay, the calendar's turning to March, right? Well, guess what? Alabama's 0-2 in March. Yeah. So is the tournament setting going to be what turns them on? I don't know. I don't have expectations that it will at this point. I think they'll beat Vandy or Georgia on Thursday night. But then, and another good thing is just, when the tournament's in Nashville, which it typically is, right? They've had like a 25-year agreement. And this is the 1 year it's in Tampa. But the Kentucky fans are just absolutely wild in Bridgestone Arena. So I'm interested to see kind of, what the fan numbers are down there. We know what percentage of what teams are down there for fans, but it's not going to. I don't expect. I know Blue Nation travels really well, but I don't expect it to be as raucous of an atmosphere that Nashville would have been. So maybe Alabama gets an edge there. But if you go look at Alabama's first game against Kentucky, when they went 3 for 30 from threes. And, Jaden Shackford was obviously dealing with some illness, and he did not play very, very well. They had a shot to still win that game, and Kentucky was at full strength. Xavier Wheeler played. Ty Washington played. So you can kind of draw back at what Alabama worked really well in that game, definitely defensively, and how they limited Tshiebwe. But I thought for Alabama moving forward, that I thought this gets killed them in the LSU game. They've got to get Noah Gurley and Charles Bediako on the floor out there at some point. You can't go long stretches of the game without those two guys out there, and that's, to me, what killed them against LSU last weekend.
There were certainly some interesting substitution patterns, or I guess lack thereof, really, at the end of the LSU game, where Nate Oates kind of kept the same guys out on the floor with Keon, Darius, JQ, JD, and Rojas for long periods of time. Yeah, and I agree that, we've seen Gurley really improve lately, his post-up game. We've seen Charles Bediako getting more comfortable in the offense and defense, and, didn't see either of them get a ton of playing time down the stretch against LSU. And so I think those are two kind of important guys for success, especially against a team like Kentucky with the size they have. And really, you talk about that first Kentucky matchup, and I think the two Kentucky games are really like the perfect example of the Jekyll and Hyde of this team. Like the first game against Kentucky and Tuscaloosa, they shoot 3 from 30 from 3, but they play really good defense, but like they just can't get any shots to fall. The game in Rupp, they come out on fire shooting from 3, especially Keon Ellis, who kind of talked about after LSU that his teammates are encouraging him to shoot the ball. Like he's been shooting it well lately. But then, Nate Oates said after that second Kentucky game, they told them early in the game, if y'all keep playing defense like this defense isn't good enough to win. And it wasn't. They, the shots slowed down a little bit, and the defense, even when they were making shots, wasn't good enough. And it wasn't good enough the whole game. And Kentucky was, like we talked about, was missing people that game and played the same 5 guys basically the entire time. But the Alabama defense just wasn't there. And so, and then we've seen a couple games where they put it all together. And so will we see that in March? It's kind of like with this team, it's like almost like you can't even make predictions because there's no way to know which team's going to show up.
Yeah, it's like we're talking about Kentucky, but I mean, is Alabama going to get there? Or like, could they lose to Vanderbilt? I mean, they really could. They're probably not going to, but let's not forget they barely escaped Nashville with a win. Scottie Pippen Jr., he's a player, and he's tough. And, if a guy like that gets hot, you never know. It is different playing in Tampa than it would be playing in that, like weird arena in Nashville. So I think that, that's something that will help Alabama in that matchup if that's who they play. But I don't know. I like you said, you just can't count anything. I mean, I think you'd look at the roster on paper and you'd say, oh yeah, well, Alabama should definitely beat a team like Vanderbilt. But I just don't feel confident. I wouldn't bet on it. I wouldn't bet on this Alabama team at all.
Yeah, and on Tuesday, Alabama had 4 players honored by the SEC. Jaden Shackelford making all SEC. Second team, you had J.D. Davison and Charles Bediako making the all-freshman team. And Keon Ellis, all defensive team, all rightfully deserved. And, I know J.D. Davison got a lot of heat throughout the year at different points, but he has come on strong, I think. Turnovers are obviously still an issue. But when he's not scared to shoot the ball, he can really shoot it lights out. And moving forward, I kind of want to see him play more of this, this dog mentality, right? You saw it in parts of the LSU game. In Javon Quinterly, I saw a quote from Coach Oates on his radio show earlier this week. They were talking about, starting, what are the influences that kind of make you want to start him or make him off the bench? He was talking about, man, if you're late to practice, if you're late to any of this, I'm not going to start you. And it kind of goes back to the internal issues I was talking about earlier, but it goes back to, is this team going to wake up in a tournament setting? Because they felt it last year, right, guys? I mean, you go look, they blew out Mississippi State. And of course, you had Herb Jones, John Petty on that team. You then go back in the second half, down by 15, beat Tennessee in a tight game. Then you win nearly at the buzzer against LSU. So can the leaders of this team actually step up? And James Rojas, by the way, he's one of those leaders that Oates has talked about, who has stepped up and really kind of made as much as a difference as he could have. So I think Thursday, man, depending on how that first half in that Vandy game goes, if we see some jitters, if we see some guys playing free, because I think this is a good moment for them, right? Because their seeding's locked, right? They're either going to be the worst ranked 5 seed or either the best or the second best 6 seed, in my opinion. So that's already set up. So this is really a moment for them where they can play free, they can play loose, but we'll see.
You think there's a moment or maybe a time if things don't go well early for Alabama that the team kind of gives up on itself? I mean, just with the way things are going, you have questions in leadership. You have players who might not be there next year that, like you said, especially if you looked at the SEC tournament, they're pretty much locked in their tournament seat. I wonder, if that's something that Nate Oates has to guard against, because if things go wrong against Vanderbilt or Georgia or whatever early, is this team going to pack it in? Because they're in a slump. And sometimes when you get in these woes, you just start in your head mentally thinking, oh, here it goes again. This team has not been a very mentally strong team. I think it's safe to say that. That's one thing I think, we talk about all the positives and how this team can turn things around. That's another thing. It could still, I guess, continue to get worse if they aren't able to they're going to have adversity at some point in the remainder of the season. Things are not just going to go great. So are they going to be able to kind of pick themselves up from the bootstraps and shake it off? Because there's really no margin of error anymore.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. That could happen. I mean, really nothing's off the table with this team. They could win 4 in 4 days, which I don't think is super likely, or they could just kind of do what you said. And Tyler, you brought up their 0-2 in March so far. I mean, there's been a lot of debate, I feel like, among Alabama basketball fans this year about, is this a down year or not? Have they've underperformed what the preseason expectations were for sure, but Alabama hasn't had the consistency of reaching back-to-back tournaments in a while, especially with this high seeding. But there is the potential that they're 0-2 in March, and there's a potential they could go 0-4. They could lose the first round of the SEC and then the first round of the NCAA tournament, or they could make a run. And it's really just going to depend on what they choose to do. And it's not just that, it also is matchups, but like we've talked about, we've seen them beat. I mean, I feel like a broken record, and Nate Oates brings this up all the time too, but they've literally beaten Gonzaga and Baylor, and 2 teams that are going to be number 1 seeds in the state tournament likely. I mean, Gonzaga definitely will be, Baylor probably will be as well. Hung tough with Auburn at home, another possible 1 seed. Hung tough with Kentucky at home, another possible 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. So can they compete with anyone? Yes. Could they also, like you said, they're not very mentally tough. Could they just fold on themselves? Yes. So we'll see what happens when they get things started on Thursday.
I'm interested. What between you guys, what would be a good, like, how does Alabama save its season? Like, what do they have to do to not, I guess, to live up to expectations? Is that salvageable, even if it's probably not going to happen? Like, what would be that, I guess, that feat for when you look back at the season and say, like, oh, they did what they're supposed to do?
You make the round of 32 in the NCAAs. That, in my opinion, that is what would be like. Alabama fans should be overjoyed if they make the round of 32.
I'm talking about like from the beginning of the season, though. I think if you made the round of 32 and like didn't win the SEC tournament, I think you still look back and be disappointed. Not maybe from like where we are right now, but like if you reround the calendar a few months, and I said that's what it's going to be. Like, what if I told you that after Gonzaga? I think you would have thought, oh, absolutely no way.
Yeah,
maybe appearance. Yeah, I think you'd be disappointed. Like, looking back, if you go back to the time of Gonzaga and you say they're only going to make the round of 32, I think you'd be disappointed. But I don't think it's necessarily like they have to make the Sweet 16 to salvage the season. I think there's already things that people have been disappointed about. Like, I mean, I think back to January, mid-January after the game in Starkville, they lost again. They easily could have won and probably should have won. And Nate Oates says after the game, I was there, but we still did the post game on Zoom. And he says, I thought this was a team that was going to compete for a regular season SEC title. And obviously, like, that's not going to happen at this point, or more than likely. I mean, it was still early in the season, but I think they already had 3 or 4 losses at that point. So it just wasn't likely unless they went out. And so, he had, pretty high expectations for this team or what they could do. Now, were those expectations that people placed on them reasonable with what they lost and the experience they lost and the scoring they lost from last year and the size and length they lost? I don't know, but I think overall Alabama fans will be happy with this season if they do make the round of 32. Now, I think if they go 0 for 2 in these next 2, or if they win one at the SEC, if they win that game against Vanderbilt or Georgia and then lose in the opening round of the NCAA tournament, I think people will be pretty frustrated. But I think if they win one in the NCAA tournament overall, I guess that would salvage the season.
I mean, it's the first time that Alabama's going to be in the NCAA tournament in 15 years in back-to-back years. So, and getting to 20 wins to me is a big deal. I know it might not mean a lot to other people, but to me, 20 wins is big. And I thought the next time I would talk to you guys, they would already be at 20 wins. But A&M has proven to be a thorn in their side for the last 4 meetings. Alabama had that LSU game right then and there. And so, but I think kind of before we start making predictions here on this SEC bracket, Alabama, we kept talking about all year, okay, they have some of the best guards in the country, right? They have one of the best backcourts. Well, what is the formula to winning in March? You go look at the recent national title teams, it's great guard play. What did Baylor do really well last year? Well, they defended really well. And they had 2 great guards, Jared Butler and Mitchell, who was just unbelievable. Think back to other teams, right? You think back to Virginia team. What did they have? They had guards. They had really good guards. You just go down the list. I mean,
an Auburn Final Four run.
Yeah, Auburn, Bryce Brown, Jared Harper, those guys make difference. And Alabama has that, and they've all got to come together and play well in a single game. And I think that is possible in this kind of situation. I mean, I'm not super optimistic about that, but if you get someone who's hot, which we saw Javon Quinterly do in the SEC tournament, and guys' draft stocks are on the line. There's no doubt about that. But I think more importantly, what Alabama needs to do when they go to Tampa is have fun again. I just haven't seen this team have fun in a while. Even when they were – now, I would say going into January, this team hasn't had fun. This team probably hasn't had fun since the Baylor game, honestly. And that was just a one-moment type deal, right? I mean, the Gonzaga game was in early December. The Houston game was a week after that. So it's been a while since they've strung together consistent wins over good teams, and they're about to face this gauntlet of opponents. But let's start right here. The SEC tournament gets underway in Tampa on Wednesday night. Ole Miss, Missouri. I'll take Ole Miss there. It's the 12-13 seed game. It's whatever. You just don't want to be playing on Wednesday night in the SEC tournament. But these two found themselves their bottom dwellers in this league. I'll take Ole Miss here. And then in the second game, obviously we talked about it, Vanderbilt for me.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with Missouri. We've already seen the news today about Tom Crean's going to be done at Georgia. You have to wonder how much longer Kermit Davis is going to be at Ole Miss, and if they want to prolong that kind of tenure. And so I'll go with Missouri in that game, and then Vandy in the second Wednesday night sadness game.
Yeah, I'm probably going to go Missouri and Vandy too. The Vandy game I'm a little bit more sure about than the Missouri game. But that's kind of like, that's where I'm at as well.
Well, Florida and Texas A&M, again, the first game on Thursday, really both of these teams are fighting for NCAA tournament berths. I mean, A&M really needs to win this one. Florida, I mean, they both really do. This 8-9 game always happens every year. I feel like there's just two perennial bubble teams right here, and that's what we have this year. The winner gets to play Auburn. This is a tough for me to call, but I'll go with who's playing better of late, and that's Texas A&M. Buzz Williams has done an incredible job rebounding after they went 4-0 and then they lost 8 straight games. He went into Tuscaloosa, beat Alabama, took down Mississippi State last weekend. Give me A&M to play Auburn on Friday.
Yeah, I agree with you on like taking the hot team right there, and you know I think I was impressed with Texas A&M, you know, when we saw them against Alabama, and so I'll take them. I guess could you argue that Florida is like the closest? You talked about like Kentucky traveling, like Florida, I guess would be the closest. Home, I don't know if that's gonna matter at all, but no, I think I'll take Texas A&M in that game as well.
Yeah, I don't know how much that's going to matter for an 11 a.m. game on a Thursday. I mean, obviously Florida will have more fans than A&M, but so I mean that could give them a boost, especially like you said, both teams are fighting for the state tournament spot. It's kind of interesting how the way things ended in the SEC with 5 teams at 9-9, and how Alabama and LSU are so securely in. Florida and A&M are fighting for that bubble spot, and South Carolina is like not even really in the conversation. But yeah. It's tough, but I think I'm going to go with A&M. I feel like Buzz Williams just really has those guys playing well right now. Don't really know if it'll matter for either team when they get to the next round and have to play Auburn.
Yeah, and then I'm assuming we all have LSU moving past either Ole Miss or Missouri. We won't talk on that one. Mississippi State, South Carolina. Mississippi State's dead, in my opinion. They've been dead for a couple of weeks now, even though they came really close to beating Auburn. I got South Carolina winning that game. I don't know if you guys agree or not.
I do. I got South Carolina.
See, I think Mississippi State, because they were kind of fighting for that tournament berth, and like you said, that they went to overtime with Auburn, and I was kind of watching some of the end of that game, and then I had the Mississippi State A&M game on the other night because it was going to affect Alabama's seeding. They were down by a lot. I think like close to 20 in the second half, or at least double digits for most of the game. And they ended up making it a really close game at A&M. So I feel like that team has a lot of fight. Obviously, a Frank Martin coach team does too, though. But I'll go with the Bulldogs.
Well, they just played last week in Columbia, and I know home court matters a lot in college basketball. Carolina did take care of business there. And then moving on to the nightcap, the final game on Thursday, we all have Vanderbilt against Alabama. All of us have Alabama winning that game, as it sounds like. Even though Scottie Pippen Jr. could be a factor, Vandy's size could be an issue there. If Alabama gets into foul trouble with guys like Charles Bediako or Noah Gurley or James Rojas, that's a game where they're really going to have to grind it out because Jerry Stackhouse, I know Vanderbilt's record has not always been great since he's been there, but he's a great X's and O's coach. And even when you talk around about the league, you say, okay, who's one of the better coaches who may be underrated? I think Jerry Stackhouse is. And we'll see. And it's not Memorial Gym, which is amazing because that place is probably one of the worst gyms in America to watch a basketball game. So then Auburn, Texas A&M. See, this is what's interesting to me. Auburn outside of the jungle. If you look at this from against the spread perspective, Auburn, since Bruce Pearl's been there, they are not great outside of Auburn Arena, in my opinion. And you look at the numbers; they're well below 500 against the number outside of Auburn Arena. So we'll see what happens when they get in the Senate. Last time they had this opportunity, what happened? Alabama blew the doors off them in 2018 when last time they were the 1 seed in the SEC tournament. So I'll take Auburn here, but I think this game is going to be closer than a lot of people would indicate.
I'm definitely taking Auburn here. There's a better team. They'll have extra rest. I mean, this Auburn team's really good. And this Auburn team has lost a few games, so I think it's going to wake it up. I think maybe if it was like riding a winning streak and it didn't have to win. But now I think this Auburn team's going to have something to prove. I think, I'm not saying they're going to win the tournament, but I don't think they go one and done.
Yeah, I got Auburn here. I do. I mean, like you said, last time they were the 1 seed, Alabama did kind of boat race them, but I think that 8 seed Alabama with, Colin Sexton, a lottery pick is a little different than this 8 seed A&M team.
Who knows? They are number 1 in the SEC in steals and number 3 in the country as well there. So they're going to defend the ball really, really well. Moving on, let's see, LSU, Arkansas. Man, this was a great game. I don't know if you saw this a couple weeks ago. It came down to the wire in Bud Walton Arena. LSU's been a part of some really close games this year. Arkansas coming off of a tight loss to Tennessee on the road. Give me Eric Musselman and the Hogs over Will Wade and the Tigers. Eric Musselman, man, ever since he's taken that Arkansas job, they have the most wins in the SEC. And he's just taken that program to the heights where it used to be, and it's relevant. And I like Arkansas to beat LSU there.
Yeah, I like Arkansas too, and I think that they're a team that just started slow, and they're a team that should have had a better season too. But they're hitting at the right time instead of Alabama. It seems like they're fading. So yeah, I like them. I think that's going to be one of the better games in the tournament, though. I actually like both teams. But like you said, I like Eric Musselman. I think they're hitting their stride. And this is a team that's kind of like a sleeping giant because it was one that, I would have projected to fight for the SEC title at the beginning of the year. So yeah, I'm going with the Hogs as well.
Yeah, this is a tough one for me because like you said, that game a couple weeks ago in Bud Walton was so good, and LSU led for like most of the second half until I think for most of the final 10 minutes until they fouled Note with like 10 seconds left and he hit both free throws to take the lead. So I feel like LSU is going to want revenge from that game. But then also Arkansas has been playing so well lately. Alabama, and is Alabama the only team that's beaten them in like the last 15 games, or did they lose? They lost to Tennessee.
They lost to Tennessee. Yeah.
So I feel like they're also going to be kind of mad from that because they had the chance to get higher seeding if they beat Tennessee. So this is a toss-up because, normally LSU and Will Wade do pretty well in tournaments as well. I guess I'll go with LSU just to be different from y'all.
Two of the most hated coaches on Gump Twitter, Will Wade, Eric Musselman. Outside of Bruce Pearl, these are obviously the two most hated coaches in the SEC from Alabama fans. So it will be interesting to see those two get together. And then South Carolina or Mississippi State against Tennessee. I think we all know there. That's kind of like Tennessee got really, really fortunate getting that 2 seed, playing the winner of that game, I thought. And so then kind of moving on, Alabama, Kentucky. And we talked enough about this matchup right here. I just don't know. I haven't seen a lot from Alabama over the last 2 weeks to just indicate to me that they're ready to beat another opponent like this. And not defensively, not enough. Offensively, with the turnovers, I still not liking what I'm seeing for the most part. And at the end of the day, at this point in the year, 5 months into the season, you are who you are. There's not much else you can do about it unless you catch fire. So Kentucky moves on to the semifinals on Saturday, in my opinion.
I think so too. I think the only thing, it's hard to beat a team 3 times. And so maybe Alabama, like maybe they get the break, things will break their way. Maybe they get really, really hot against Kentucky, kind of like what we saw in the first half of the last game. And then they're able to sustain that maybe, or, play better defense. I have Kentucky winning too, but like it's just like I said, it's so hard to beat a team 3 times. I don't think Kentucky wants to play Alabama in this game per se. I pick Kentucky, but you can't count on this Alabama team. I don't think you can completely cross them off of any game. So I think it could have the chance to be an upset, but I'm going with Kentucky.
Yeah, you can never count them out, but you can never exactly count them in either. That was the point I was going to make, that it is hard to beat a team 3 times. And like I talked about earlier, the first matchup, Alabama played well on defense, didn't shoot well. Second matchup, they shot well, didn't play defense well. So could this be the game when they put it all together? Yeah, it could. Do I think it will be necessarily? No. And just because they do put it all together doesn't mean it's going to be enough to beat Kentucky. Obviously they're a really good team. They're a top 5 team in the country. They have like the greatest rebounder of all time on their team in Tshiebwe. So yeah, I'm going to go with Kentucky.
Yeah, Oscar Tshiebwe, well-deserved SEC Player of the Year. Just, across the board, just a well-respected guy, too, off the court. Yeah, and who's – every time Alabama and Kentucky meet in these SEC tournaments, this is really a moment where John Calipari thrives, right? This is what really good coaches separate themselves. And I just think, I think a couple of years ago when Alabama played them on a Saturday in the semifinals, Windham Gabriel, knocked down like 6 or 7 threes. And I just asked myself, who's going to have that game for Kentucky against Alabama this time around? It's just one of those things where, Tyler Eulis going off too a couple years back when they played on a Friday. Who's just going to be that guy for Kentucky to be that thorn in Alabama's side? They're the two. This is the game that nobody else, no other combination of teams has met more in this setting than Alabama and Kentucky in this conference history, which is just a fascinating nugget to me. Okay, Auburn, and then
I will say one more quick note on Alabama. We all just picked them to lose in the quarterfinals to Kentucky, but Nate Oates has never lost in an SEC tournament. So, and he's been overall pretty successful in conference tournaments. So, I'm not kind of like Tony said, I won't be surprised if Alabama wins. I'm not completely ruling them out, but I'm going with the Wildcats.
Yeah. And so Auburn, LSU for you, Katie. Auburn, LSU for you, Katie. Auburn, Arkansas for me and Tony. I've got the Hogs taking down the number 1 seed here.
I've got Auburn winning. Might be just a bit of like a redemption game. I think my theme of this tournament as we go on, because I'm kind of like playing it out in my head, would be redemption. I think Auburn, this might be the last game I have Auburn winning, but I do think Auburn wins this game. It'll be close. I like this Auburn team. You get, I think when I look at the teams just on paper, I like what I see more with Auburn than I do with Arkansas, but I think this will be a close game.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Auburn, even though now that I'm thinking about it, I believe Auburn and LSU only played once this season. I'm checking that now. It was that
game of the year.
Yeah, it was when I was in Dallas for the Cotton Bowl, and I remember watching it in my hotel room. It was when LSU had like 1 point in the first like 10 minutes of that game. And so it's been a long time since these two teams matched up. So if they do play again, I think it could be pretty interesting. But I guess I'll go with Auburn.
And then Tennessee and Kentucky, two teams that split their regular season meetings. Give me Kentucky in this setting. Now, I like what Tennessee has. Kennedy Chandler, Ziegler, Fulkerson. They have a lot of solid pieces. But give me just Kentucky. Kentucky, to me, guys, feels like a team of destiny. Like, I feel like they're going to make a run in the NCAA tournament. They just have – they have the three-point shooting, and they have a player in Oscar Tshiebwe who – he is one of the best centers I think I've ever seen at the college level. So give me Kentucky there.
Yeah, I think when you look at I think Kentucky's kind of almost what Alabama wants to be. Like, they can shoot the three, but they have that big guy. That's kind of what Alabama lacks. I know Bediako can have his moments, but he's not Oscar Tshiebwe. And I think that for me, Oscar Tshiebwe is probably the reason why I'm continuing to roll with Kentucky. I just think he's going to be, like you said, a difference maker. He's going to dominate the boards, and he's going to give them that inside presence that even when the 3-point shots aren't falling, they can still get points. It's kind of like what we saw against Alabama. They're a team that, they can beat you with with the inside game as well.
Yeah, I agree with you, Tyler, that it kind of just feels like this is Kentucky's year right now, the way they've been playing lately. And their most recent matchup between the two teams was the one in Knoxville, which the Vols won, and so I feel like they may kind of want to avenge that performance, and so I'll take Kentucky heading into the finals.
So either Arkansas Kentucky for me, Auburn Kentucky for you guys. Either way, if we get that matchup, either one of those, it's going to be terrific. And I've got Kentucky, cutting down the nets in Tampa. But a number that people really need to keep an eye on, right? 67-1. That was the record for the top 4 seeds at home. They held their ground. That's why they got to this point. So, when you take away that home court advantage, the playing court, is very neutral, I think, in the SEC, given how deep and how the depth of this league is the best we've seen it in years. So to me, that's going to be very, very interesting, right? So what team can kind of, take away, okay, we're getting uncomfortable, right? We're at a neutral site. We're not at home. What team can do that best? And in my opinion, Kentucky is that team because they've proven time and time again that they did that in the SEC, whether it wasn't dropping games, at Florida or at Arkansas, So I think that's one of the reasons Kentucky is going to take this home.
I'm going to continue with my redemption tour again and go with Kentucky getting its payback against Auburn in my bracket. And just the same reasons why, I had Kentucky winning the last matchup. They're a complete team. You can call them a team of destiny. They're the best put together team in this tournament. And that's pretty much enough said right there. That's why I have them.
I think Kentucky's been waiting for this rematch with Auburn to get another shot at them. The two teams only met once in the regular season in the game at Auburn Arena. kind of early in the SEC slate in January. So I think they've been waiting for this chance. And so I think if those two teams do match up in the finals, that Kentucky will come away with the win.
Well, if you
Also,
guys
it's like super hard to win both. And like if you're just going, I'm a big like karma guy, or a big like, like just like what are the odds? And Alabama winning both, followed by Auburn winning both. It just like that's like statistically hard to do. And that's another reason, I guess, why I'm picking Kentucky.
Well, if you guys remember, Auburn, Kentucky met January 22nd. I remember it was my wedding day. We were watching while I was getting ready. Ty Washington got hurt in that game, didn't play 3/4 of that game. And Xavier Wheeler was, I'm not sure if he was 100% at that point either. So, they're kind of have that going their way. And I think, too, Ty Washington is obviously one of the best two guards in the country. And I would love to see that battle between Walker Kessler and Oscar Tshiebwe again. That would be really fascinating to me. And obviously the professional scouts of that game. I mean, you have Jabari Smith, who's going to be the #1 overall pick. I mean, there's just talent all over the court. And you've got guys who can elevate your program and take that into the NCAAs. But yeah, Kentucky's going to win this thing. You heard it here first from all three of us. So it's pretty exciting.
I'll be surprised if we see something crazy from Alabama.
Oh, we 100% will. This is the SEC basketball fever. Catch it. Something wild's going to happen for sure.
And me and Joey and Blake will be down there covering it all for y'all.
Yep. So for Katie Windham and Tony Tsoukalas, I'm Tom Martin. This has been another edition of the All Things Bama podcast.